Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us for this presentation. We are going to be presenting on section 3 of the book, which is Be Intentional. My name is Quinten. Patti will be joining us. Vani will also be joining us in the presentation.
Hi.
And to start is Desi. We hope you enjoy it.
Okay, so the first part is making the most of every minute. If a teacher is approached, I don't think we will ever hear something like this for a plan. I'm going to make sure we do only about 50 minutes of real actual work today. But believe it or not, this is what happens once we're in the classroom. We've all seen teachers multitasking and how slow the start of a class can be. Here we have a picture of a teacher multitasking, and here we have also a funny definition of what multitasking means. A picture of a teacher calming one child, disciplining a second child, listening to a third child, all done during attendance the first 5 minutes of the day. If we do the math and we add up to the time that is lost at the beginning of every class, we will see that it is a lot. According to research, time for learning is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, correlates of student success. The National Center for Education Statistics found that only 68% of time is spent teaching core academic curriculum. Where does the rest go? Where it goes to non-academic activities such as recess, fundraising events, lunch, and other activities under the social services umbrella. As I was saying, time lost adds up to 15,695 minutes, which equals to 262 hours in a school year. That means that nearly 30% of our time is spent on housekeeping stuff. Now, what if the students are not on task during these 2/3 remaining of school time? Students may spend only 61% of time actually learning. Wested introduces 4 ways to think about time. First, we have allocated time, which is the number of hours attending school in a school year. The second is instructional time, which is class time when students are inside the classroom. The third is the time in which they are engaged, in which learning activities take place. And finally is the academic learning time, which is when learning actually occurs, when there is an alignment between the teacher's activities and the student's readiness and interest. Now, what are the tips for teachers and on how to manage their time best? Well, the first thing is to account for every minute of class time when planning. If you do not plan ahead, then chances are you will end up wasting your time and your students' time, which is worse. Do not let housekeeping items to steal your time. Assign a time frame for every learning activity, and this can be done using a lesson planning template in which we detail minute by minute what is to happen in a classroom. It can easily run 3 or 4 pages long for a 60-minute period plus. And in some schools where they have tried this, they had 100% of their seniors accepted in college. Coincidence or not, I think it's worth trying it. One way to do this specifically is to aim for bell-to-bell learning, which means to have an energetic pace throughout the entire lesson. And whenever you think there is dead time, embed learning into that non-instructional time. So the teacher should always have a do now activity. As soon as they walk into the classroom, the students walk into the classroom, the teacher has something for them to do. And meanwhile, the teacher can answer questions or help some students out, those stray students. We can also break learning into smaller chunks. However, do not become obsessed about time. Avoid fruitless over-planning and just try and allow some time for students to process the information as well. Another way to do this, another strategy, would be establishing routines and procedures to reduce time lost to non-academic activities. So training students the first few days of school saves hours as the year goes on. And routines can be used for all of these things: passing out papers, dividing the students into groups for group activities, entering and exiting the classroom, transitioning between one activity and the other. You can also name helpers, and students can refer to these fellow helpers to guide them and to tell them what to do. And another way is also to work with instructional leaders. So in other words, to work with the administration to minimize disruptions to learning time. Front office demands robs nearly 1/3 of teaching time according to research. So pizza planning, or maybe permission slips, or donations, or assemblies, drills, and the like will usually steal a lot of time from our time. Conducting a time audit, assessing where time goes minute by minute, is a good way, and the results can be shown to the administration. Another good idea is to reduce passing time. So instead of students mobilizing and rotating from one class to the other, the teachers can rotate instead. And another way, which we are trying here at FDR, is having block schedules, but only provided that teachers make the most of their expanded time. So instead of having single 60-minute periods or 45-minute periods, we have the 90-minute periods. And finally, providing activity stations, so having a highly differentiated classroom in which students no longer wait for the teachers to meet their needs, but they can work pretty much on their own independently. And if they're ready to move on, they can advance on their own. And those who need extra time can stay where they are and get some extra support. And the teacher can, of course, walk around the classroom making sure this is happening the right way. So do not spend your days racing against the clock, trying to fill up the students' heads with knowledge and concepts, but instead, being intentional about time means using it wisely, and that's what it's all about. And now it's Quinten's turn, and he's going to tell us about the 6 C's.
Okay, thanks, Desi, for that. So in our section of the book, in the whole book, it talks about these ideas of the 6 C's. We will be focusing on 4 that are in the section 3 of the book, and I will discuss the first 3. The first one is connection. Scientists are learning that our brains are an interlaced web of memories, ideas, and associations. And at the core of learning, we need to connect new learning with what we've already learned in the past. If we don't provide students with additional ways to connect their learning, then they're not going to assimilate this knowledge. And it's our job as teachers to make these connections explicit to them in these patterns. Some applications in the classroom could be providing cues, give an overarching theme and activate their background knowledge. We could ask connecting questions that require the students to extract from their previous knowledge. We could provide advanced organizers. For example, they could be visual, like a graphic organizer, expository, narrative. They could be the key terms of the lesson or a vocab sheet. It might be an ESL handout to help the ESL students, or a quick skim of the text. The next C I'm going to talk about is coherence. Our brains are hardwired to pull information together in patterns and concepts, as the study from Jensen finds. Student needs direction from their teachers, or they might be focusing and learning about something that you don't actually want them to learn about. This can happen in inquiry and project-based learning. Students' brains appear to be more suited to learning the whole before the parts. So we can help students retain this new knowledge by seeing both the wood and the trees. Applications in the classroom can be advanced organizers, which I mentioned earlier, non-linguistic representations, which are things like graphs and images and pictures. These convey knowledge in a non-textual way. Infographics, cues and questioning, and helping students to then integrate and make sense of this knowledge. The last C that I'm going to be talking about is concentration. There is one factor that trumps most others in determining what is remembered. What you think about when you encounter the material, says Willingham in a study in 2013. That sounds very obvious, but when we consider what Desi presented at the beginning of the presentation, with a waste of time, we can see that we can definitely focus on this area. Sam and Ellis add to this and say students are more likely to recall concepts than names and more likely to retain higher order thinking skills. How can we bring them to these higher thinking skills? There are some applications in the classroom. We can anticipate what the students will be thinking about during each lesson. We can ask them open-ended questions. We can check their understanding on their deeper knowledge and provide them with critical thinking activities. Other things we can do, intentionally provide students with opportunities to aggregate their knowledge into bigger concepts and more in-depth knowledge. Help students make these meaningful patterns. Last 2 ideas, you can give students time to process the new information on their own with their peers or with you, the teacher. And then just remember that shifting the students' concentration when they are focused on a task will distract them and make it more difficult to go back to that task. I'm going to now pass over to Vani, who will consider coaching.
Okay, so my part is coaching. A coach of elite performers share the ability to size up their students and determine where they need to go next. A good coach has the ability to look at the student, pretty much size up their character and the way they think in a short period of time. A coach of elite performers share the ability to size up their students. Do differently is a fairly straightforward process of observing students, identifying opportunities for improvement, focusing students on improvement their skills in targeted areas, and reteaching as needed to ensure mastery of new abilities. One of the applications in the classroom could be get them engaged, inspired, and motivated to succeed by structuring your course and each class to help students know what to expect. For example, use the syllabus to clarify what the student will learn, your expectations, and how the course will be conducted. Another application in the classroom could be provide learning experiences where students feel they can be successful by setting challenging but attainable goals and assignments, success with reach, and encourage student choice in how to achieve a particular assignment or learning outcome. Another application could be foster application connection of what students are learning to their own lives by designing learning experiences that are relevant to students' lives. Also craft activities that encourage application of content to situations they will likely encounter. And finally, viewing teachers as coaches shifts the paradigm and places the onus on both pupil and coach to improve performance and develop mastery. Indeed, this is a very sense of what lies at the heart of both great coaching, where they must improve and helping them to do something about it. Moreover, it is the act of coaching that makes teachers truly indispensable. Next, Patty.
Thank you. Okay, so it is important to know that learning doesn't become real until students have the opportunity to do something with their knowledge in their real life settings. Teachers should always ask themselves when planning a unit, what should students do with this knowledge? To make your class interesting, try to apply this in the classroom. Do projects that require students to develop and test their own scientific hypotheses, persuasive essays that require students to integrate research, grammar, and writing skills, a presentation that compares one historical period with another, a small group assignment to develop a mathematical formula that relates factories' cost with scale of production, class discussions, Socratic seminars, the final word protocol, and real conversations. Every day, all learning should ultimately be leading to application and extension. Use classroom discussion to help students extend learning by doing these several strategies. Socratic seminars, final word protocol, written conversation. Socratic seminars help, well, they could be useful for above and upper elementary schools. Their desks are arranged in circles so that students can interact with one another. Rules are set, like be respectful with others, don't interrupt, pay attention, and teachers should ask questions to start discussions. The final word protocols greatly increases student comprehension of what students are reading. This type of small group strategy works especially when texts are giving different viewpoints. You have to divide the students in groups of 4. Each student spends 1 minute answering the teacher questions, and one student takes, and the other students take notes. The last student to speak in each round gets the final word. Written conversation is a simple strategy when students write responses to teacher-provided questions about tests and then pass the responses back and forth to the other students. Use writing assignments to help students extend learning. Having students read and then write about the text has a far more positive effect than any other reading intervention. To apply it in the classroom, for very young students, they can do voice-recorded journals, podcasts, or other verbal means of communications for elementary. And writing assignments need not to be elaborated or time-consuming. Strategies that can help students be better writers. You could use summary narrative, essay writing, learning from exemplary writing. You could use projects to help students apply knowledge. There's an example of a middle school history course that combined direct instruction with project-based learning. Students gain more content knowledge with this approach than with traditional methods. Important points when doing projects is that you be clear of what knowledge you want students to develop or integrate. Be clear what you want students to think about while doing the project. And frame the students around a driving question so that you keep them focused. It is important to encourage students to extend and apply their knowledge by solving complex heuristic problems, meaning problems without predetermined steps to follow or solutions. It's asking them by asking them to generate and test hypotheses, engaging them in complex problem solving, use the web for inquiry projects so that they learn where to look the information, arrange the entire unit as heuristic. This means that the teacher constructs the entire unit around a complex problem, and then the student works around with smaller chunks to solving the larger problem. Teach problem solving to students and how to brainstorm possible solutions with their peers. And lastly, when we show students how to put their learning to use for themselves and others, we truly unlock the gift of learning for them. So that's the whole meaning of being a teacher, to make it interesting and not boring. I hope you enjoyed our presentation, and I hope you learned something from it. Thank you, bye.